Hello.
Okay.
Hi,
Hi,
Phil.
Paul. How are you doing?
Hey, I'm good. Coming in right at 10:30. Great to see everyone. In an ideal world, I would have joined 5 minutes ago, but here I am. Um, how, how are you, Hollis? How's everyone doing?
Good. It's raining here now.
Oh, good.
It's supposed to be clear today.
Here too. Well, I see a lot of new faces. Just going through the attendees on the top of my screen here. Um, just a little bit about myself. I'm Paul Hobi, Program Manager of Seabird Protection Network at the Greater Farallones National Marine Sanctuary. I live in San Francisco, but I am a child of Sonoma County. I grew up in Petaluma. My parents take me out to the Sonoma Coast, Point Reyes. I learned to surf out at Salmon Creek, maybe a little on the south side of Goat Rock. I see that in someone's background there. And I love the Sonoma Coast and feel a really strong affinity for folks that are helping protect it and make it a better place. So it's always an honor and a pleasure to present to you all, which we've been doing every year. And so I'm going to talk a little bit today about the Greater Farallones National Marine Sanctuary, as well as efforts of the Seabird Protection Network to reduce human disturbance to seabirds. So I'm going to share my screen. I take it everyone's, able to hear me and stuff. Okay, good. And I should just say, if at any point you have any questions, feel free to chime in on the chat or just unmute yourself and ask away. This is I do have quite a bit of material to get through here, but stop me at any time if you have questions, and we'll also have time for discussion at the end of our program. So participants can now see my screen. We're gonna do a slideshow from the beginning and swap views. Okay, so I can see my slides, but I can't see you all. So I won't know if you have a question unless you just blurt it out. So again, don't be shy. And I'm also going to be asking you some questions to encourage some participation throughout the deck. So
Paul, we're not seeing slideshow mode. We're seeing your whole PowerPoint screen here. So.
Oh, good. Okay. Let's see.
But we see the slides. So.
Well, but hold on. Let's see if we can remedy that. Thank you, Hollis. Ba-da-ba.
Oops, I shouldn't have interrupted you.
No, I'm glad you did. We need to.
Sorry.
Let's do entire screen.
It's okay. The other night I was trying to get my screen up and I lost my whole Zoom window.
Oh, fun.
Yes. There you go. You're good to go.
Okay, cool. So this is sort of my intro slide, but since I've already introduced myself, I'm gonna, start off by talking about the National Marine Sanctuary System. I think everyone probably knows where this is, so I won't make you shout it out. But if you want to, okay, fine. Where is this?
Bodega Head.
Bodega Head.
It's a cool, very cool picture, actually.
Yeah.
It's not bad, right? And you can kind of see the hole in the head.
You can see the hole in the head and you can see the stratigraphy really well.
Yeah, which is, we tell people about the hole in the head in our e-newsletter and stuff, and it's a fascinating story, and one that really helped galvanize the protection of Bodega Head and the Sonoma Coast, and a story that I did not learn until semi recently. But we're gonna start on a more national level. And talk about the National Marine Sanctuary System. There are 15 National Marine Sanctuaries throughout our greater United States. There are 3 that are proposed, including one on our coast, the Chumash Heritage Sanctuary, that would go, I believe, between Santa Barbara and San Luis Obispo counties, which is proposed. But currently there are 5 national marine sanctuaries that are off of the West Coast, from Olympic Coast down to the Channel Islands. And when the federal government designates a national marine sanctuary, it is for a good reason and a good set of reasons, and it means it's a special and important place in terms of habitat, in terms of marine life, and all of that is protected in one way or another. Our mission is to conserve, protect, and enhance the biodiversity, ecological integrity, and cultural legacy of our coast. So off of our California coast, there are sanctuaries, include Greater Farallones and Cordell Bank. Cordell Bank is offshore. Greater Farallones expanded to north of Bodega Head, which was the former boundary, in 2015 to north of Point Arena. The Monterey Bay National Marine Sanctuary is our coast largest. It extends pretty much the extent of the Big Sur coast, and includes the deepwater Monterey Canyon and Davidson Seamount. And then the Channel Islands National Marine Sanctuary protects some, but not all, of the Channel Islands. You'll see Catalina is left out there. But the oldest sanctuary on our coast is the Farallones Sanctuary, which was established in 1981. So, uh, I'll get into the regulatory framework that concerns us about wildlife disturbance in a moment, but I wanted to share with you some wildlife viewing guidelines that the National Sanctuary System has put together. These are national guidelines. They're pretty broad, because they're not for a specific audience. But I really like what they've done here with a set of guidelines of things that you can and should do, rather than prohibitions of stuff you shouldn't do. And we've seen throughout our program that this kind of can-do messaging has been helpful in engaging audiences that are really important when it comes to actually reducing wildlife disturbance, and showing them what you can do. So you can access these on the NOAA sanctuary site, and learn a bit more about them. They have a great pocket guide for all of these behaviors that they're trying to encourage. And their kind of slogan is "Hang back and enjoy the view, and give wildlife space." Again, these are pretty general, but I do really like the positive messaging, and leading by example, and I think that's something that we can all kind of keep in mind. So the Office of National Marine Sanctuaries, our broad goal is resource protection. And we have lots of scientific equipment and scientists that man underwater drones and big boats, planes, ROVs, and divers that help us understand the national marine sanctuaries. And we also have robust educational programs across the nation, and the Farallones Sanctuary runs educational programming out of our San Francisco office that teaches kids about the ocean. We have a visitor center at Chrissy Field. our staff try to get out in the field in the northern reaches of our sanctuary in Walala and Point Arena to educate kids up there about the sanctuary and about ocean protection. And all of these, contribute to our ultimate goal of resource protection. So there are many regulations that govern and protect the oceans in our sanctuaries. And there's one big one that ties them all together. So any idea what one big regulation is in all of our national marine sanctuaries that they all share? One thing they all prohibit. The floor is open. Feel free to guess.
Predation.
Discharge from ships.
Discharge. Fishing. So
Oh,
those
fishing.
are all great guesses. So I'll speak to fishing because marine sanctuaries are not established to regulate fishing. We have state marine protected areas that help do that. The National Marine Fishing Service establishes some federal regulations on fishing. But the conservation-oriented mission of the sanctuaries does not hit on fishing. I did hear discharge, and we have discharge regulations for the Farallones Sanctuary. I don't know if all sanctuaries share those, but there are some exceptions to discharge. The one thing that all marine sanctuaries prohibit without exception is oil drilling. And fighting offshore drilling was one of the big reasons that the Monterey Bay National Marine Sanctuary was established starting in the late 80s and then ultimately established in the early 90s. So it's oil drilling. And I know that that's something that has been a big issue on the Sonoma Mendocino coast. And that is something that our sanctuary prohibits. It's one of the many layers of prohibition of new oil drilling off the California coast. So we're really, here today to talk about wildlife disturbance regulations. This is kind of a lot, but there are site-specific regulations that apply to the Farallones Sanctuary that specifically address wildlife disturbance. They include flying aircraft lower than 1,000 feet in specific locations. We will get into each of those locations that are on the Sonoma coast. Again, discharge with certain exceptions. We won't get into those specifically here, but we do regulate discharge, and we, will fine people for illegal discharge. Altering the seabed, so especially if we're talking about like the Tamales Bay, eelgrass beds, if people are, trying to put moorings in there or alter the seabed in the sanctuary, they either need a permit to do that or they're doing it illegally. We're really trying to protect, habitat, especially eelgrass. And then take of marine mammals, turtles, or birds. And, so what is take, right? And under federal law, disturbance is considered take. So if you're flushing mammals or birds off of their roosting places or their rookeries, that is considered take. And then we also have probably the most strict set of regulations governing white sharks, involving attracting or approaching white sharks. We permit all of the white shark tours that go out to the Farallones, and they're not allowed to attract the sharks using any kind of biological attractant. About the only thing they can do is lay down this carpet-size decoy that's like a carpet shaped like a seal or sea lion with kind of the outline there, and they can't, they use a fishing pole to deploy it. They're not supposed to be like jigging it around and trying to attract a shark. Sometimes the sharks actually do approach it, and the wildlife watchers on the boat get to see them, which is cool. But most of the time, little secret, the boats that go out to the Farallones to see sharks often do not, although there's lots of other great wildlife there to see. So we're going to get into NOAA regulated overflight zones. These are the specific zones that are designed to protect wildlife and seabirds from low overflight of planes and drones. And we'll talk a bit more about kind of what happens during low overflights and why that's not good for colonies of mammals and birds. But the gist of these areas is that failure to maintain a minimum altitude of 1,000 feet is presumed to disturb marine mammals or seabirds. So according to the reg, it's what a lawyer would call a rebuttable presumption. If you are under 1,000 feet in these areas, then the law presumes that you're disturbing marine mammals or seabirds. We don't need to see you doing it. You need to be above 1,000 feet in these areas. So where are they? These are the overflight zones that are over the Farallones Sanctuary. There are more in Monterey Bay and Channel Island sanctuaries, but we won't get into those. And these were all designed to protect sensitive wildlife areas. And so, denizens of the Sonoma Coast that you probably already recognize that these areas are covering the Russian and Gualala river mouths and the significant wildlife populations that live around them. So we're going to talk about a few of these, starting with what is affectionately but not legally known as the Mendonoma overflight zone that covers the Gualala river mouth. These zones don't have specific names in the regs. They're just on FAA aeronautical charts, which is, a big deal. I don't know if there's any civilian pilots out there. I'd love for you to identify yourselves, but getting these zones on the charts was a big deal. Every pilot looks at these charts, they know what they are and that they are supposed to stay under above 1,000 feet in these areas, even if they don't know why. Seabird Protection Network, we try to get in front of pilots and tell them about why to increase their understanding. But the Mendonoma overflight zone, we can zoom in on it a little more closely here. That roughly is between Anchor Bay and the Gualala River mouth. This is designed to protect the significant wildlife that is hanging out at that river mouth and in that area. The reason why we cite these along river mouths, they bring a lot of nutrients to the ocean. You combine that with a rocky, wild stretch of the coast, and there's lots of marine life there, right? So similar situation to the Russian river mouth and kind of this whole area that stretches from north of Fort Ross to Duncan's Point. There's a lot of harbor seals, some sea lions hanging out there at the river mouth, and then the seabird colonies that you all are monitoring. So again, aircraft should not be flying below 1,000 feet in these areas. That aircraft does include drones, and I understand that there is a prohibition on using drones in Sonoma Coast state parks. And so, people really should not be flying drones over the coast or anywhere near there. We're going to move on to Point Reyes overflight zones. There are 3 in Point Reyes. There's a lot going on in this aeronautical chart, but they represent the farthest north point, kind of around the Elk Reserve at Tomales Point. The Point Reyes Headlands, which is going to be the farthest west area pictured here, including the Point Reyes Lighthouse. This is home to over 20,000 common murres and cormorants. It's a very large, seabird colony complex. They use this whole area. And then very hard to make out, and maybe impossible to make out here, Bolinas Lagoon, right? And Duxbury Reef. This is on the Pacific Flyway. Bolinas Lagoon is a very important stop for migratory birds and is also protected by a NOAA regulated overflight zone. So, we are all amongst friends and allies here. This isn't something I go around telling everyone, but enforcement of these areas is difficult. But they do offer excellent outreach tools for pilots. And again, since they're on the charts, our real goal is to ensure that pilots know about these areas, they're aware of the regulations, and that they maintain 1,000 feet above these NOAA regulated overflight zones. So we really use them strongly as outreach tools. They're great for that. And they do have teeth, if there are people that are egregiously disturbing wildlife by low overflights, we definitely want to know about it. There are things that we can do. And in the next section of the presentation, we'll talk a bit about reporting people that are violating zones and disturbing animals, seabirds and marine mammals in other ways. But I want to pause right here, see if we have any questions. I think I might be able to pull everyone up. I don't know, do you guys have any questions about these specific zones? Can I go back and highlight any of the specific areas for you? Or
Paul?
Yeah.
Bill Perry here. I was just wondering, do you have a zoomed in map of the no-fly zones that's north of Tomales Bay? That's an area I think you indicated on a previous map?
Okay, so the first one north of Tomales Bay is going to be around the Russian River mouth.
Okay, so there's nothing between Jenner and Bodega Bay?
Nothing between Jenner and Bodega Bay. That's correct.
So,
Well,
Paul?
actually, Bill, Gull Rock is included in the overflight zone because it extends down to Duncan's Landing.
Right.
Yeah, so you monitor Gull Rock, and that's included in the overflight zone.
So Paul, just a little bit more from what Bill is talking about, since I also monitor Gull with Bill and also do beach watch through NOAA, which
good.
But before the end of your talk, to give a shout out, because a lot of the volunteers who are on this call, I mean, that's another really big piece that I don't think you have mentioned yet, but maybe you're going to, about that program and how important it is. But we did have, and maybe Hollis can elucidate as well, 2 drone incidences, and probably Hollis even more. One was at Salmon Creek when my husband and I were on a beach watch walk, and it's really clear we're not enforcers, right? So we can only go back to the ranger station and report it. And then another incident that one of our stewards of the Coast and Redwoods that happened near the Jenner mouth, and she actually engaged the drone operators, and they were well aware of the FFA information, and they did end up packing up their stuff and leaving, but it was really a gray zone. So that's the stuff that we're running into out there, is the drones.
Okay,
well, and Ellie, since state parks has a prohibition on drones within the Sonoma Coast State Park area, your best bet is the ranger.
Right. I remember we all talked about
because that's localized. Yeah.
And we were hoping for the signs.
Yeah. Oh, okay. So Stewards did design signs, and we have posted them in areas along the coast. So if you have recommendations for additional sites where they can be posted, please send them to me or send them to Justin.
Okay, that's great. Thank you.
I have a question, and I don't know if my if my raised hand never shows because it's sort of in the corner of my screen. Anyway, my question is, I'm a roving docent on the coast, and I love the positive messaging. I also love having things I can hand to people, like where you can take your dog, you know, things like that. And I really liked some of the pocket guide you showed, but I haven't actually seen that anywhere. Like I have various other brochures I can hand out to people. Is that available somewhere other than printing it off from, you know, a NOAA website? And if so, where can I get some of those that I can hand out to visitors with positive messaging?
Great question. I don't know. I have not heard of Big NOAA printing those, but I'm gonna ask, because that would be a nice thing to have. You know, so it's like, I'm a big fan of printed outreach tools myself, especially, you know, you're in an area where cell phones might not work all the time, or people might not want to be busting them out. But that's something I will have to get back to you on. And just to go back to Ellie's point about Beach Watch, I actually don't have a slide about Beach Watch. But Beach Watch is, you know, one of the cornerstone programs of the Farallones Sanctuary. It's a longstanding citizen science program that dates back to, I think, 1993. We have over 150 volunteers that volunteer to monitor a specific stretch of beach, and you guys go back to the same beach every time, right, Ellie? I mean, it's, so your site is Salmon Creek. Volunteers walk the beach. They report on dead wildlife. They track human use of the area, and this has contributed to a long-term data set that tells us a lot about how people are using these areas, you know, what sort of wildlife activity is going on out there. And that's helped inform many things, chief among them management of marine protected areas and understanding human uses out there, if there's illegal fishing. And the other part I liked about your anecdote is that it's a nice seg into, well, what do we do when we see people that are doing things they're not supposed to be doing, right? And you know, there's a big spectrum there between, you know, reporting it to authorities, and you know, I know sometimes that can feel like it's going into a black box, and maybe it's not their highest priority. It's still super important to do that, you know, because the more incidents there are, you know, the better we can understand them, and the more resources we can dedicate to addressing them. And you know, at the other side of that spectrum is approaching violators, which, you know, can come with certain risks that you know, I think we should all be aware of. Virginia, I see you have a hand raised.
Yeah, there was a 1-800-NOAA enforcement line. Is that what we call if we see injured wildlife, or is there another number that we should be calling?
That's a really good question. That is not an injured wildlife number. That should be called for marine mammal or NOAA overflight regulations. And we actually have a slide at the end of the presentation that gives you all of that information on one slide. But and once upon a time,
I have a document that lists phone numbers for where to report marine mammals, seabirds that are injured and whatever, and I'll post a link on where you can pick that up.
There's also back to, oh gosh, now I lost your face. A great question about the positive brochures. And I know that NOAA in the Chrissy Field office, because we got them as part of our training, And I'll try to go through my binder right now and see if I can dig some up and just flash the picture, and maybe Paul can see if he can track some of that down.
Sure. If there are, yeah, please do that. And I'm happy to track those down and send up a grip of them to the steward's office. So report back, Ellie. And unless there are any other questions, I'm going to continue to the Seabird Protection Network portion of the presentation, which I think will help answer some of the questions that have come up. So Seabird Protection Network is a program of the Greater Farallones National Marine Sanctuary since about 2007. We have worked to address human disturbance to seabirds in the Farallones and Monterey Bay National Marine Sanctuaries. And all of our program is to address human disturbance to breeding seabird colonies. The breeding colonies is kind of an important, important caveat. We're really interested in protecting these birds, and to protect a species, we believe you need to protect the places that they breed. So our focus is really on these big colonies at the Farallon Islands, at Point Reyes, the Sonoma Coast, and and Devil Slide Rock. So so the reason why we do this is to enhance the recovery of seabird populations that are damaged by oil spills along the Central California coast. So oil spill funding is what powers our program. That means that we need to focus very narrowly on a set of species, which include common marine cormorant, and a specific geography, which, we're a chapter-based network. My chapter spans from Point Sur to really Point Reyes. It says Bodega Head on this map. But that's the geographical extent of the spill whose funding is powering our chapter. And today, of course, we're here to talk about the Wallala to Bodega Head chapter, which is all volunteer powered and volunteer funded, which is amazing. The Trinidad chapter also relies heavily on volunteers, and the Point Sur to Point Mugu chapter has been funded by the Torch and Platform Trustee Council, and then the Channel Islands is funded by an additional source of oil spill funding. The most active chapters now are mine, Bodega Head to Point Sur, and Wallala Point to Bodega Head. And the idea of a chapter-based network is really to pursue local solutions to specific problems and to understand how best to influence them. So our target species again are Brandt's cormorant and common murres, with a specific focus on their colonies. And so I want to talk a little bit about the story of the common murre, which is something that we talk to pilots and talk to boaters about, and try to develop a little bit of empathy with this very cool bird. So the common murre looks like a penguin, but they live right here. It's a bird that many people might not know about, but if you're spending time in the water, you've probably seen one of these birds. We tell people they're long-lived, right? They can live up to 27 years. They're great swimmers. They can dive down to 600 feet to catch a single fish. And each pair of these birds, works on laying and incubating one single egg during the breeding season, between November and August. And they're doing all this while they're perched on the edge of a cliff without, any real nest, balancing the egg on their feet, trying to protect it from predators. And they have not had it easy on our coast, starting way back during the gold rush, right? Many people flocked to San Francisco and what we now know as the Bay Area during the gold rush, but there was no dairy farming along that stretch of coast, right? San Francisco was this tiny little backwater, and so since there was no dairy farming, San Franciscans started going out to the Farallon Islands to hunt the eggs of common murre and other birds out there, but especially the common murre. They would row out there in these rowboats in, challenging conditions. They'd wear egg shirts, which is seen on the left. They can stuff all of these eggs into one shirt. They would climb, these craggy rocks to, you can actually see a bird, I think, on that middle photo. To hunt these eggs, and they pile dozens of eggs in their shirts. The murre eggs actually, they're one of their evolutionary advantages is that they have thick shells, and so this made them ideal for people to stuff into baskets and row across bumpy waters back to San Francisco, right? So in 1854 alone, over 500,000 seabird eggs were gathered for sale to San Francisco restaurants. This was a big business. They only really avoided Western gull eggs because their shells were a bit thinner and they wouldn't make it across the passage. And some eggers also avoided tufted puffin nests because the birds had a really ferocious bite. So these birds were really easy targets. Wars broke out between different egg companies. They shot at each other. The lighthouse keepers at the Farallones tried to get in on the action. And it only really stopped after chicken farming had started up full on in Sonoma County and other areas. But as a result of this, the population had collapsed because, again, the murres only lay one egg a year. And, in 1930, an expedition to the islands only found a total of 4 common murre. So, estimates have, a population of 400,000 birds that dwindled down to 6,000. And, over the years, they've faced other threats. They've been caught in gill nets, seen on the left, as bycatch. This was only stopped in the year 2000 off the California coast. They've been hit by a series of small oil spills, and a remediation process made possible funding for common murre restoration at a place called Devil Slide Rock. So it's just south of San Francisco, north of Half Moon Bay Airport. And biologists kind of had this wild idea that they could bring back a population of murres to this little offshore rock here that was once home to several thousand birds, but they'd been extirpated starting in the 1980s. Birds were not coming back to this rock. And so in 1996, scientists started taking trips out to the rock. They installed decoys. They used what are called social attraction techniques. They also put mirrors out there, CD players playing bird calls. And their goal was to try to bring birds back to this rock. And it worked. First a couple breeding birds came back. They eventually started growing to hundreds and now thousands of birds. The decoys were removed in 2005. And today this is a pretty healthy colony of over 2,000 individuals that breed on this rock. But as the biologists were monitoring this area, it's still heavily monitored today. They noticed that human disturbance was a really big problem. So, this is the Devil Slide Rock area. Again, it's just a few miles north of Half Moon Bay. There's a busy port there, Pillar Point Harbor, and a small plane airport, Half Moon Bay Airport, and it's just 15 or so miles down the coast from San Francisco. So there's air traffic over this area. We've seen disturbances from small planes, from helicopters, including the Coast Guard, even a blimp at one point, which has thankfully been retired. The blimp caused actually the worst disturbances of any of these aircraft. And then there's also watercraft that come in this area. There are fishermen that use powerboats to come out here, and occasionally kayakers. It's a pretty rough, remote stretch of coast, so there are not a lot of kayakers or stand-up paddlers, but we do see them. So we really try to focus on these groups for targeting outreach and reducing disturbance, specifically at Devil's Side Rock, but really educating them about the whole coast. And I'll tell you a little bit more about how we do that. But the big problem. Go ahead. Sorry.
Oh, Bill, I was just going to say, do you know that one of the scientists that was totally part of that whole thing is with us right now? And that's Bill.
Bill Perry.
Yeah.
Yes, I do. I don't know, Bill, if you have a few any words to say about the restoration process. I mean, we're
yeah, I worked for the U.S. Geological Survey out of the Dixon Field Station, and we had a seabird group working there, which included Jerry McChesney and Harry Carter and a couple other folks. And so we got involved kind of late in the recolonization effort, but I made several trips out there. We were interested in looking at the spatial arrangement of the nest sites relative to the rock itself. But yeah, it was an interesting project, and we took several Zodiac rides from Half Moon Bay out there, and then climbed on the rock, spent all day on the rock, locating the nests using highly accurate GPS, and then did a research paper on the project later on.
Yeah, I mean, those Zodiac trips were no joke. I mean, you see everyone wearing their red coats and helmets. And did you ever capsize out there? I know some.
No, but it was precarious jumping onto the rock and then back into the boat. And I remember a couple of occasions when if you don't quite make it, then into the water you go, and then they just pull you out and you try again. So yeah, an interesting trip.
Yeah, I think these photos, well, this one, it seems pretty precarious, but this other one, it's like, oh, it's a nice, warm day. We're in our t-shirt and got a little climbing gear on, but it's really hard work. And so thank you for telling us a bit more. And it's an amazing project, right? Like, people, I think at the beginning of the project, really did not know whether it would work. And one of the theories on why it did is that these birds are long-lived, right? So they were extirpated starting in about 1986. The social attraction started in 96. So I think that one of the hunches that scientists have is that these birds remembered this rock, and they had gone back there. They'd been there in the past, and started coming again when the social attraction efforts started. So I always thought that was pretty cool. But it's been a heavily monitored area since the restoration started in 1996. These human disturbance issues keep happening here. They happen elsewhere. But since Devil's Slide is such a busy area, there's really a lot of disturbance happening here. So it's been a big focus of our outreach. And again, what happens during disturbance can be illustrated in this funny little animation. the boats or the plane come too close, they spook the birds off the nest, and their chicks and eggs can be exposed to predators and they can lose them. So, this is a more realistic depiction. You see the murre with its egg scared off of the, scared off of its little nest site. And then, predators like the gull come in, they eat, either the entire egg, or that's actually them eating a gull eating a murre chick. And we tell folks that one event can impact a whole generation of seabirds. So that usually resonates. And so that is part of our outreach. But really, what we're trying to do is build relationships with these boaters and pilots that are spending a lot of time over around this area, and might be out there causing disturbance to birds. So we give presentations to kayak groups, Western sea kayakers, Bay Area sea kayakers. We attend events. There's an annual fly-in in Half Moon Bay that conveniently happens right kind of at the beginning of seabird breeding season in April, when the birds are pretty sensitive. That's been a big source of disturbance in the past, but by attending this area, building relationships with these pilots, we're able to educate them about the need to fly high over the area, and we've seen that reduce disturbances in the area. We create materials. This one on the left, we're really working on sharpening our messages for boaters. I'll talk a bit more about that. This is long and short, way too long. There's too much here, in my opinion, for boaters to remember. But our top line message is still the same, which is stay 1,000 feet from cliffs, rocks, and islands where birds are nesting and resting. We send an e-newsletter, the monthly Aviator for pilots and the monthly Drifter for boaters. I think I can pop
While you're looking for that, Paul, let me just jump in on the topic of materials and everything. And at the steward's office, especially if you're roving, you can pick up this fabulous brochure called Seabird Aware. It's by the Seabird Protection Network, Stewards, and Point Blue. And it just is a one, nice two-sided sheet that has all this great information. It has who should I call, it has the life cycle, it has, talks about 6 of the main birds that we see there. It has the seabird major breeding colonies. It's a fabulous little, thing to carry to either show people or hand out to people with great positive messaging on it. And there are usually a bunch of them at the Stewards volunteer office that you can just grab and put in your pack and hand out to people when you're roving.
Okay, cool. Thanks, Karen. We definitely have more of those if you need more of those. We designed that product with Point Blue long ago, but that's definitely a good one. And I popped a little link if you guys want to subscribe to our boater newsletter. We try to include like fun stories about wildlife and birds, in addition to why you shouldn't disturb them and how to avoid doing that. So here's kind of what we tell people, specifically boaters. 1,000 feet is best from a boat or a plane. This can be challenging, right? If you're in a plane, you have an altimeter that tells you how high you're flying, and pilots are generally really conscious of that. If you're in a boat, yeah, it's tough to tell how far away you are from something unless there's a buoy there, and usually on the outer coast there is not, for good reasons. NOAA has specific marine mammal viewing guidelines. For whales, it's 100 yards dolphin porpoise 50, and your pinniped is also 50 yards. We tell boaters to watch for signs that they're too close. You know, if the wildlife is looking at you, then you know if they're reacting, then you're too close. You know, and if you look at these photos together, you might think they look cute at first, but I think that you can kind of start to see there's a stress reaction happening here, and that's a good sign that you're too close. More recently, we've been really focusing on our top line messages, which are that 1,000-foot distance, and for boaters, learning how to spot bird rocks. We have found that the term seabird colony is confusing. Even seabird can be confusing for people. A lot of boaters that we talk to, we say seabird, they think gull. And gulls, for a lot of boaters, especially fishermen, are kind of considered nuisance birds, right? So we're trying out bird rocks. We're telling people a kind of rule of thumb that white rocks equals seabird flocks. So if you see, these white rocks, birds taking off and landing, that's a good cue that you're seeing one of these bird rocks, and to stay 1,000 feet away. Special prize if anyone can identify this one. Shout it out, but I'm about to tell you because it's one of 6 special closure areas. So we also tell boaters to learn to spot bird rocks using their charts. This is not the best map, but these are on nautical charts. These are 6 special closures that were designated as part of the Marine Life Protection Act process. They're sort of less visible here. There are these kind of drab gray circles. But the previous photo, this is Point Resistance, which is a special closure off of Point Reyes. It's kind of right here below where it says Estero de Limantour. These are all breeding seabird colonies. Point Reyes Headlands is one of them. Farallon Islands. They all require at least 300 feet distance, which is, the law. We tell people 1,000 feet is best practice. And so, this is how boaters can find these areas using their charts. So I did want to spend a moment talking about Bodega Head marine protected areas, as well as the Russian River. The red area, the SMR, is a no-take marine reserve. These are regulations taken very seriously by the Department of Fish and Wildlife. If you see people fishing in this area, including shore fishing from the little beach that's down there, you should report it to CalTIP and maybe call your local CDFW ranger, and I'll provide some contact information there for a second. In a second. The Bodega Head SMCA can be kind of hard to know these boundaries. But in the blue area, you control for pelagic finfish, and you can crab. So those are permitted fishing there. At the Russian River SMCA, this is outside of the river mouth and offshore, you are allowed to take Dungeness crab by trap and surf smelt by net, but you're not supposed to be fishing off the beach in this area that extends from the beach just north of Goat Rock. And I don't know the exact name of the northern boundary here. And then within the Russian River, it's called the State Marine Recreational Management Area. It allows for waterfowl hunting, but prohibits other types of fishing. So what are we going to do when we're seeing these violations? Who do we report them to? If you're seeing poaching in marine protected areas, marine protected area violations, or illegal dumping, report them. You can report them using CalTIP. They have a web app called Tip 411. You can also text to Tip or call. And then Hollis, I know that Tiffany Wolvek is still with CDFW, but I believe she has a new position. I don't know if we should still be calling her directly or.
This is Justin. We have a tip sheet on our website. I'll put it in the chat, and it has the best numbers to call for things like this.
Okay, good. So these, I hope these are not dated, but please correct me, because if we're talking about seal violations at the Russian River mouth, I believe we're supposed to call the Sonoma Coast Ranger Station. And I hope that's still, I trust that's still valid. I do know that, for NOAA enforcement, if you're seeing seabird or marine mammal violations, we want to know about it. And if you're seeing violations of NOAA regulated overflight zones, we also want to know about it. So if you're seeing violations, try to photograph, any aircraft or boat, especially if you can see the CF number if it's a boat, or the N number if it's a plane. Take photos and quickly kind of note an account of the incident, where it occurred, when it occurred, and any individuals that were involved. We also have a wildlife disturbance reporting form. I can try to pop this in the chat, but I'm going to have some trouble doing that.
Paul, I've included the protocol and the hard copy of the online reporting form
Great.
at the Google link that I finally got working.
Okay. Okay, perfect. Thank you, Hollis. So this is a reporting form that Seabird Protection Network manages. And so if you're seeing harassment, flushing, harm of wildlife, which includes these, boating or aircraft related disturbances, or, people on foot that are disturbing, nesting or roosting seabirds or marine mammals. And I would say if it is an egregious disturbance, then you want to report it. And we can maybe talk a little bit more about what an egregious disturbance means, but if it's a colony related disturbance in which a lot of animals are flushed from the colony, I think that's an egregious disturbance. So why do we report these, right? It helps us inform responses and know where problems are, when problematic activities are occurring, so if it's egregious, flushing, trampling, egg loss, chick loss, and if you have evidence, that really helps us do something. Like you can see in this plane, you can make out the little N number there on the fuselage. So that kind of provides us an opportunity to do something. So my recommendation is to report it as soon as possible, document specific information, and again, photo or video evidence is really helpful. So how do you report it? It is a multi-step process, but it shouldn't take more than a few minutes. You want to access the online form. I think Hollis dropped it into the chat. Complete the form with as much detail as possible, and then submit it. You will then get an email with a PDF of the completed form. You want to review that, make sure that everything's correct, and then attach any photos, videos, or a map of the incident. And this will be an email that that comes from me. So we'll go through the form a little bit. This is something, if you need help filling out the form, I'm available. Hollis is available. This isn't something that typically folks are doing, super regularly, but it is really important to document these egregious disturbances. So, it starts by asking for some personal information. Again, this goes, to me, this is stuff that's only used internally. You will fill out information about the date of the incident, the start time of the incident, the duration, the weather. There's other there's many other parts of the form. I won't go through each part of the form, but they ask if it's a boat or foot or aircraft disturbance, and for specific information about the disturbance and what sort of vehicle caused it. I put this together a couple years ago, but it sounds like, Hollis, you have an updated form that you've shared, right? But the idea is we want everyone to have this information on one handy sheet that they can use. But I'll defer to you, Hollis, if you have an updated version of this that you can share.
Mine is from 2015.
Oh,
so if you have an updated version, I'd like to have it. The one I just uploaded to the Google Drive is dated 2015, I believe.
And there's also one that I put in the chat that has some information in it as well. That is one that was updated in late 2022, early 2023.
Oh, okay. I'm sorry. The wildlife disturbance form is dated 2015. The document on where to report things was put together last year. I beg your pardon.
So here's the Stewards document. I mean, I would take this with you, but there is some additional information on my little guide here with wildlife harassment, NOAA zone violations for low-flying pilots, and then filling out our disturbance reporting form. So I don't know, maybe we can touch base and see about adding a couple of these to the Stewards form. Would that be a good? Okay. And now I can move to the final couple slides. So how can you all help? You can advise people to keep a distance from wildlife on the coast if that's something that you're comfortable with. By knowing marine protected areas and special closures, as well as these NOAA regulated overflight zones, where they are, what the rules are, that can make you a better informed, wildlife monitor, so you will know exactly when violations are happening. It can be really hard to tell when a plane is flying under 1,000 feet. There's some specific training that wildlife monitors do at Devil's Slide. I don't really know how to do it. I mean, if they're planes that are like flying at eye level, for sure they're under 1,000 feet in these zones, and they really shouldn't be doing that. And then finally, reporting violations using CalTIP or to one of our phone numbers is also really helpful, so we can understand problem areas and problem actors, and try to target them with outreach and, if appropriate, enforcement. So we usually end this presentation by discussing approaching violators. We can do that. I can answer any questions that you might have. I think we've identified a really good follow-up to add a little bit more information to the Stewards guide, and we can do that. But what kind of questions do y'all have?
I just have a comment about gauging what 1,000 feet is for the overflight zone. If you're in the area of the Russian River, if you can see Red Hill, I think is close to 1,000 feet, and so that's always been kind of my reference point. If you're on the Fordham Trail, for example. looking out towards Gull Rock.
And I think that's something we can probably add to the presentation to add some context, but.
This is Justin. If people want to raise their hands, that's a great way to ask questions. You can also unmute yourself. I'm unmuted and actually have a question as well that I'd like to ask Paul. Thank you for the awesome presentation. We talked a lot about, I think, regulations and reporting and things like that. And I think this is going to be kind of a theme that continues with some of the other presentations today. And Benjamin Franklin said an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure. And I just wanted to see, in your experience, how can people help with the prevention aspect of this, before we get to the point of having to do this violation and reporting. And there's lots of deeper stuff under that question. Yeah, wonder what your thoughts are.
There are two chairs.
So that's a great question. If you're on the coast, you're interacting with visitors, telling them that it's important to keep a distance from wildlife, and since we're talking about a specific area, right? Like, let's talk about the specific problems. In my eyes, one big one is people approaching the seal colony at the Russian River mouth. It's a big colony in a popular area. Telling folks to keep a distance from that area, I think is probably going to be a pretty high payoff activity, right? I mean, I know it's roped off. There's good ranger presence there, but still there's disturbances there every year, right? Telling folks that are flying drones, they shouldn't be doing that on the Sonoma Coast. There's other inland parks where maybe they can do it, but not here. I think is really important. My program is gearing up to do lots of outreach in the boating community. If there are any folks that have contacts down in the Bodega Bay, Spud Point Harbor, or contacts with boaters, specifically fishermen, we're working on putting together a guide for. We decided that we'd put together a rockfish guide that bakes information about how not to disturb seabirds into it, because we think it'll be, more appealing for fishermen. Like, have this free laminated rockfish guide that has information about seabirds and seabird colonies and how to identify them and avoid disturbing them. If anyone, has contacts that can help distribute those, or can introduce us to fishermen we can talk to in the Bodega area, we'd love that. We may be at the Bodega Bay Fishermen's Festival. We're kind of up on the wire designing products right now. I don't know if we'll have them ready for the festival, but I think it might be a good opportunity for us to meet folks and gather more information. So I don't know, will you guys have a table? Can we hang out at a table?
Yeah, you can hang out. We're actually going to have 2 tide pool touch tables and one with the Department of Fish and Wildlife through Bodega Marine Lab.
Oh, good. And that's definitely on the radar. There's not a lot of fishermen's festivals on our coast, and that seems to be one of the cooler ones. So let's definitely follow up on that. It's certainly on my radar.
We'd love to see you there, Paul.
Yeah, well, we'd love to be there.
Yeah.
Looks like Tanisha has a question.
Yeah, I was just wondering, because you're talking about the development of sort of guides and information. Is there a plan to make that available in multiple languages to sort of reach out further into the community?
That's a great question. So that has been a particular concern of mine. Somebody that's been involved with state marine protected areas for quite some time. I've always advocated for translation and localization of materials. That's been done more in Southern California, specifically translating brochures into Spanish. I don't know whether we have marine protected area specific information for our coast. We should. It is a priority of mine to produce these rockfish guides and outreach materials in Spanish, but we're still working on the English versions of them and thinking about other languages that we can translate them into. But that's a great question. If I can find any languages other than English that materials specific to the Sonoma Coast are available in, I'll make sure that Hollis knows about them. And again, we will be working towards developing them ourselves. But it's also a matter of like prioritizing outreach to these audiences, right? Like you can't just create materials and hope that they'll find their way into the right hands, right? Like you need to make sure that you're also planning on distributing them. And that's a big that's been historically a big challenge for agencies is getting them in the right hands and working to understand those communities. So great question.
Thank you.
¿Qué más? I can't see if anyone else has hands raised, but
neither can I.
Looks
And there's nothing in the chat. Oh, Suki.
Yes, so this is something I'll contact state parks again. Part of the problem that we've been having with the kayakers is we have some people who haven't applied through their permits through state parks and who aren't insuring state parks that are coming down and wanting to do rentals and guided activities. And it's actually written that you're supposed to have a permit and pay your $25 and 10% anytime you're charging for activities out of there. And it started becoming especially rough during COVID. And so we're still dealing with some of that backlash, and it can be rough sometimes because they'll want to take their people right in close and flush the colony. But I'd be happy to check in. I haven't really had a good conversation in meeting the new, superintendent of that, the state parks now. There's been changeover since COVID. But I'd be happy to check on that. I'm hoping. I've been places, for example, on the river where we've done our whitewater training and stuff. Behind me, I'm out on the little rock out there with the little pink helmet. They have places where you have to, it's very clear that if you're charging for money, you have to have a permit, and it's right on the board. And there's a tag where you can fill out to start getting your information and do the process. And it actually might be good for us to have something like that for the people who are actually doing business and charging money for using the boat launch there at the visitor center. I think that could really help, because then they'd have to, do the training and be fully aware of what the limitations are.
Being at those launch sites on busy days, I think can be really impactful. That's something that we've done at Pillar Point. We've tried to target boaters when they're, when they're about to get on the water, and kind of make those decisions that might include getting too close to the colony, right? So I do think you're onto something with building a relationship with the superintendent, and also getting the Sonoma Coast Warden's number on your phone so you can call them if they're getting too close and flushing the colony. And one thing that really seems to get the attention of enforcement is if somebody is part of a business is, you know, making money and taking people out doing stuff that they're not supposed to, that generally becomes a priority for enforcement, rather than, you know, a single actor that might not know or might say they didn't know, you know, is somebody that might get off with a warning or might not be a super high priority. But if you got a business and you're taking people, you know, out kayaking and they're doing stuff that they're not supposed to do, and you don't have your permit, you know, that's a good opportunity for enforcement to get involved.
Karen.
And as long as we're talking about brochures, especially for any of you who are roving or who are in places where you encounter these people, I'm super excited about the brochures that you're talking about and looking forward to seeing those. In the meantime, another brochure that's available at the Stewards office, and you can pick up a bunch and carry in your roving pack, is this one, which is a guide to fishing in marine protected areas, Bodega Bay Harbor. And it does, you know, it talks about the MPAs. It has, you know, a nice little map of the MPAs. It has contact information for the Seabird Protection Network and Fish and Wildlife and all sorts of other things like that. I'm often hand this out to people who are fishing. The one thing I would love to have that I don't have, but I have to say I haven't researched it as fully as I should, is I often have people ask me, where can I go to find X? Like, where can I legally take, you know, urchins, which I know we're not allowed, it's not allowed anywhere in Sonoma County, although they do more up north further and stuff like that. So if anyone's aware, like, of something that, you know, casual fishermen, especially shore fishermen, that tells them what they can take where. This obviously tells them what they can't take where, but like, reach out to me and let me know, because I would love to have that in my pack if it exists. And I don't fish, so I don't know. I have no idea how to answer these questions.
I mean, the California Department of Fish and Wildlife Sport Fishing Regulations booklet tells them that. I mean, it's pretty tricky because regulations change. But you know, it's like, if you're fishing on the coast, it's up to you to know that information, and you know, and to follow what changes. The Department of Fish and Wildlife also has an app, and or at least a mobile site that includes MPA boundaries, regs. There is also an app called Fish Legal that, you know, when you're talking about like boat guys, most of them should have navionics and GPS on their boat. That includes, you know, see, I just shared this as a direct message to Stewards, but like shore fishing, you know, guys might not have all those resources at their fingertips, but this app would be a good one to tell folks about and see if they can download it, because it will tell you all fishing regulations. It's supposed to be continuously updated, and it also has offline capability. So even in the, you know, cell phone challenged Sonoma Coast, it could work. So I would recommend that. And there are where you can fish brochures that have been created down south, but I don't think they've done that for the Sonoma Coast.
Okay, thank you. That's super helpful. Yeah, I'll start there.
Paul, you can actually go out to a lot of your sports fishing stores in the area where you live or where, you know, you're doing this work, and they are very knowledgeable, because a lot of these individuals are guides in many areas, but they can tell you where and what you can fish and what you can't fish, and that also would help with probably abalone as well.
Yeah,
Yeah.
when I was at the General Visitor Center, because I don't fish either, I used to refer people to King's Sporting Good in Guerneville.
Yeah, that should be a really good resource for folks as well. I know that
well, we're running short on time here, so I want to keep things moving along. And thank you so much, Paul. This has really been a great presentation and really, really helpful. By the way, Paul co-chairs the Golden Gate MPA Collaborative. And back in the day when the MPAs were first being implemented, Paul did a presentation at the Bodega Bay Grange. When was that, 2010 or something, 2011? And so he has an extensive background with other agencies beyond the Farallones Sanctuary and the Seabird Protection Network. So he's a terrific resource for all things concerning regulatory agencies along the coast. So hoping to see you at Fish Fest.
I hope so too. And if anyone wants to get in touch, I forgot. I have my, thank you all for spending some time with me this morning and asking great questions. Here's my contact information. Feel free to get in touch anytime. This actually has our old logo. It's a white pelican that bird experts looked at and were like, that's not really a coastal bird, so you should change it to a brown pelican. And we did. Wow, that's a big cat behind Ann Lewis. I did not notice that. Is that real? But anyway, thank you all again, and thanks for your excellent volunteering to help understand and protect the Sonoma Coast that is so dear to me and so dear to so many people. So great seeing you all. Thanks, Hollis, and have a great rest of your day, everyone.
Oh, thanks so much, Paul.
Terrific presentation. Thank you, Paul.